Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part there for the, goodness me, the 24th of February 2025. And of course, this is the anniversary, the 3-year anniversary of the start of the war. It's, I guess, a somber day in the calendar, and we are seeing an awful lot of foreign dignitaries in Kyiv this morning paying their respects and also meeting, getting together, a good chance to meet and network. And there is a flurry of announcements already concerning aid to Ukraine and whatnot. We also had the German elections last night, which ostensibly were good news for Ukraine, especially with the incredibly strong, really robust rhetoric coming from Friedrich Merz, the almost certainly the new chancellor for Germany. And just lots going on. And as ever, when there's so much going on, it strangles the bandwidth for the sources and the information coming out on the nuts and bolts of the war, what's going on the front line. So yet again, not a huge amount of data to go through. We have the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course, to these figures, and you can find them in the description to the video below. The statistics for personnel losses continue to drop lower, still above 1,000, but at the low end of that range, 1,050 personnel lost. 9 tanks, which is just about the daily average. 6 troop-carrying AFVs, which is a huge drop there down to a really low number, and 44 artillery systems, over double the daily average there. And I've been talking about how I think there's an explicit objective for the Ukrainians at the moment to degrade the Russian artillery, and they appear to be doing a jolly good job of that. 3 multiple launch rocket systems is a good haul in that category, given the daily average there is probably about 1 and a bit. The vehicles and fuel tanks category sees 110 lost, and like I said yesterday, you're going to see a record number in the drone category today, given that not last night but the night before there were 267 drones sent into Ukrainian airspace. They generally cut the I think the cutoff is sort of in the middle of the night, so any figure in the drone category is usually a combination of what happened last night and 2 nights ago combined. So that's why we see a particularly high number there, even though last night wasn't a record night, although a lot of drones were still sent into Ukraine. Okay, so that suggests, I think, somewhat quieter, comparatively speaking, day on the front line. I don't know whether weather will be playing a part. It's almost certainly the fact that, the Russians have been going at it for an awful long time, and they appear to be slowing down, have been slowing down for some time. We've seen that on the mapping front. We've seen that with the claims of the intensity of attacks going down, so on and so forth. There will be areas of the front line where they're still really going at it, hammer and tongs, of course. Okay, what other sources do we have? No Andrew Perpetual loss list again today. Sorry. Max 24 reports that 8. Well, actually, this is Malyuk. So yesterday there was a conference in Ukraine, the annual conference, Ukraine, I don't know, the forum, 2025 forum, something like that, where you had Zelensky, and I talked through this on my live stream that was last night with Jonathan Fink. We did a real late night one around midnight last night to discuss all that have been going on in terms of the German elections, but also everything that Zelensky said. So go and check that out if you want a good synopsis of everything Zelensky said yesterday. And he said a lot of really important things. Go and check that last night's video out, please do. But there were a number of people at that forum, including Budanov, Malyuk, I think Sursky, all the big sort of army, armed forces personnel were talking, Q&A sessions and whatnot. So there's quite a bit of data coming out, quite a bit of information coming out. We're going to go through some of that in the other section with what Budanov was saying. But here Malyuk says 85% of the destroyed personnel and equipment of the Russian armed forces are the work of drones. So now we're getting another figure on the claim. 85%, that's gone up again. That's incredible. 85% of the casualties and equipment are lost by drones. Wow. as a result of drone activity. That is incredible. We have seen a substitution, particularly for the Ukrainians, of artillery for drones, the FPV drone, and the drone drop, the IED dropping drones as well, doing an incredible job in terms of degradation of Russian armed forces. Unfortunately, there was another incident yesterday of execution of Ukrainian troops. Russian troops have once again cynically violated the Geneva Convention, says War Translated, cold-bloodedly executing 2 wounded captured soldiers of the 82nd Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces near Sudzha in the Kursk Oblast. The full uncensored video can be viewed on the Telegram channel of War Translated. If you want to see horrific things, then obviously feel free. But yeah, just it's worth reminding ourselves and others of the horrors that the Russians commit in this war. Magyar has shared footage, so the guy who's in charge of Magyar's birds now become its own brigade. His drones have been at work as ever. Fiber optic drones are already operating, he says, 20 kilometers deep behind Russian lines. So that means in order to get 20 kilometers behind Russian lines, they're going to be operating with 25 kilometer reels of fiber optics. That's pretty incredible. And not only that, but actually this video he's talking about, War Translated again, says Ukrainian drone operators hit a fortified Russian equipment parking lot in a concrete shelter using an FPV drone with fiber optics in Seledovo. The strike took out 2 APCs, BMP-1s, and a truck. So that's pretty good. You know, look at it flying in the underground shelter there, getting in and then taking out these vehicles as it does so. Let's just have a little look at that's Magyar himself talking. Let's blow this thing up, shall we? He says, yeah. So maybe it will catch fire and set everything else on fire. Should we blow it up through the engine or in the cab? In the cab this side, he says. Bang. And there we go. And you can see inside that at least one of the vehicles is burning there, but the claim is that 3 vehicles are taken out with that. And then we have this footage. It's difficult to know exactly what's going on here, but the claim is, I mean, you can see a drone. Seems like it just is on fire, just catches fire, starts sparking, and then spins around and falls out the sky, obviously at night time. The claim is that this is a drone being taken out by laser. So Star Wars is almost here. Footage shows a Mavic drone being destroyed by a laser weapon. That is arguably a world's first in terms of on the battlefield and in terms of public footage for that. So incredible stuff. And we have heard rumors about this taking place recently. That could well be the first example of a drone taken out by laser on the in the Ukrainian war. Right, Tim White says some disbelieved Russia was really using donkeys in this war, in its war with Ukraine, thinking they'd just be stolen from locals. But here, more proof that the Kremlin has literally run out of equipment, more museum pieces refurbished and tested to send to the front. Clearly no regard for troop safety. So there has, throughout this war actually, there have been examples of really, really old vehicles, whether they be early doors when they're running out of trucks, getting these 1950s trucks going. We've also seen old motorbikes, and this is another example of motorcycles with, I think, probably hastily innovated sidecars there. But these vehicles are being, refurbished and sent to the front line. Old sort of trucks as well, Jeeps type thing. But yeah, there you go. So a lot of very old vehicles being refurbished to send to the front line, indicating that they really are a little bit desperate for equipment. Now, if we go on down there, and here we see one of those specimens in use, and surprisingly not able to protect the invaders from Russia from attack. This is why the vehicle numbers are usually very high in the table of daily losses. So there's a video apparently showing the destruction of one of those motorbikes, although I'm not quite sure what's going on there. And we also see another video of donkeys being used here carrying mortar bombs. Russian transport mortar ammunition using a donkey at the front line. So, needs must, and I guess it's useful for these soldiers, but it does indicate that things are probably not optimal for the Russians in terms of equipment. But don't think this is like universal across the front line. There'll be Russian units that are doing a very good job and being very effective. So, be careful to draw such sweeping conclusions. However, it does bring about such lovely kind of memes as these. Donkey with coke cages. There you go. Okay, so moving on to strikes, and it was another wide-ranging attack last night, or at least there was a huge number of Shahed drones, 185 in total. 113 were shot down, and 71 were suppressed by electronic warfare. That's 184, which leaves one getting through. That's an incredible success rate there. Absolutely astounding. The Ukrainians, if that is true, doing a really very good job of taking out these drones. Right, what else do we have? I just wanted to. This is Lachlan Guddy saying who lives in Kyiv, just giving a comment yesterday. I thought it was worth sharing. Yeah, big uptick of drone attacks around Kyiv. We are near central Kyiv, so many are knocked out in the distance. I don't know what we hear, not the far distance, maybe more mid-distance, but more activity for sure. Thankfully, we have double glazing, 2 layers and 2 windows, and often have headphones on to take the edges off. To take the edge off would be much louder with the windows open, as is in summer. The hit at the Botanic Garden certainly shook us, and that was reported yesterday. You can hear the rocket hit and the drone explode as well. When we were in Kyiv recently, we were in the center of Kyiv, and you do feel quite safe. Even we ignored the air raid, so we can't ignore the sirens because they're going off. But when they're the big tannoy speakers in the one hotel, in the Hotel Ukrainska that we were staying at, right in the center, overlooking Maidan Square, and it says, don't be complacent, get in the cellar or the basement bomb shelter. But none of us did, because you just feel in the very center of Ukraine, the air raids, the air defenses are going to do their job, and actually they're not really aiming for the center of Ukraine. They are almost certainly aiming for particular industrial military targets on the outskirts of Ukraine, more likely. Russians have knocked out 10 gigawatts of Ukrainian electricity, said Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal at that same forum yesterday. The government is now working to attract investments and equipment from Europe and restore generation. Gas has been recently hit quite badly as well. Okay, overnight last night, the Ryazan oil refinery has been hit yet again. At least 5 explosions are known to have been heard in the area of the target. A fire broke out in the area of the ELOU 86 primary oil processing plant, according to the Ukrainian General Staff. In addition, yesterday, Ukrainians struck an oil depot, FTKU March 8 combine in the Tula region. So there has been some success, not as much widespread activity as we have previously seen, although there might be a lot more going on than we are aware of. The Ryazan refinery, one of the largest in Russia, was attacked. Refinery has a processing capacity of over 17 million tons of oil per year, making it one of the 5 largest refineries in Russia. It produces gasoline, diesel fuel, aviation kerosene, fuel oil, and petrochemicals. And there's lots of video imagery of the strikes and the fire and the end result of those strikes at the Ryazan oil refinery. Aviation fuel plays a special role, which is critically important for the frontline aviation of the Russian army and strategic long-range aviation, which strikes Ukraine, says PS01. This is a third attack on the refinery since the beginning of the year. So this is definitely one that is gets consistent attention from the Ukrainians. Now, do you remember when, you should do, Toropets, big ammunition depot that was struck, and it caused earthquakes, and it was absolutely massive, huge explosions, I don't even remember the next day images like this. Do you remember I showed you these images? And we went through the satellite imagery of the Toropets, the ammunition depot that was struck, and then another ammunition depot that was struck just south of there, not too distant from this one as well, making it a real purple patch at that time for the Ukrainians. Well, there's some information that came out again from the forum yesterday. This chap Malyuk said 160,000 tons of ammunition were destroyed in Toropets in Russia, after which there were 4 earthquakes there. And there is a claim that 50% of all the 120 mil mines were destroyed last year at Toropets. So those strikes were particularly successful, and you would wonder, if they're going to be doing anything like that again. They are ramping up, supposedly. They've scaled up their production of these kinds of munitions. Well, actually, we don't really know what munitions were used here, but there are the claims of the Trembita, the Peklo, the Paliantsir, and all sorts of other drones and missile drones that the Ukrainians are producing. Claims that they've scaled up production of these, but yet to see them used in wide-scale attacks. Although, you go back to the fact that Ryazan was hit last night, and you don't know what was used in that. Could have been these missile drones. There are claims that they are being successfully used all the time. So one presumes that when they do attack refineries and depots, that they almost certainly using a suite of different munitions to try and that variation is an attempt to get through the various electronic warfare and air defense systems that will have, certain munition they'll be better at taking down than others. So if you do a wide range of munitions, then you've got a better chance of getting something through. Right, okay, moving on to other bits and pieces, and indeed we're going to talk about particularly what Budanov said, the head of the intelligence at this forum yesterday. Russian special services planned to assassinate Budanov and me. This is the SBU chief, Malyuk, using their rats. Over 3 years, 102 spy networks have been uncovered. Wow, says SBU chief Malyuk. Russia also planned a terrorist attack during peak hours in a Kyiv hypermarket. I am quite surprised that, and not I want to, touch wood, I don't want to tempt fate here, but I'm surprised there have not been more sort of terrorist attacks and assassination attempts. But there probably are a lot of assassination attempts that go on that we just do not hear about because they keep it on the sly. Right, Zelensky. This is Budanov, who is a military journalist. Zelensky has determined the composition of the army corps and appointed commanders. 18 corps commanders have already been appointed. He adds that most brigades are now being reduced to 18 corps. Most corps will consist of 5 brigades, 1 corps of 7 brigades, 13 corps are being created in the ground forces, 2 airborne assault corps, 1 marine corps, and 2 national guard corps. So they are moving along with the reorganization of the army, moving them into corps, which is like a mini army within an army that can kind of do everything, and really seeking to improve the organization and the efficiency and the competency of leadership, competency of recruitment, and making sure that the poorer units are taken under the wing, I think, are the better units in these particular corps, and that there's a swapping of best practices and whatnot. Now, the head of the GUR, Budanov, has stated that he personally saw the planning documents of Russia until 2045, and they indicate that, quote, if Russia does not get out of this conflict by 2025, it will lose the opportunity to become a superpower or a regional leader. This is the opportunity that the United States has at the moment, and it's deeply, deeply frustrating that they seem to have gone the wrong way. It's interesting. I was listening to Jeremy Bowen speaking from Kyiv today. I think he was in Kyiv for the BBC, on the BBC News this morning. And he was really openly saying that the United States, that Trump has switched sides. Like, this isn't just like analysts like me. This is like mainstream media outlets really recognizing that Trump is parroting the Kremlin talking points. There's a real open admission. I'll probably play that to you later in the Geopolitics video, because you wonder whether mainstream media outlets are trying to play it careful, not trying to maybe thinking, oh, we can't annoy Trump too much, or is it? It can't be true that Trump has changed sides. And then it was like, yeah, that's basically what's happening and what people are thinking. When you get people like Friedrich Merz from the CDU in Germany coming out and saying, what CDU CSU coalition agreement thing, so it's like two elements of the CDU or of that party. Anyway, whatever. He's come out and said, yeah, we've got as much threat from the US as we do from Moscow. Then you're now getting this very public recognition that Trump is moving in the wrong direction, and the United States is no longer the ally of the US. And indeed, in that piece, he was talking about how, there were criticisms about Biden about not getting stuff quick enough, or this or that, but everyone knew that Biden supported Ukraine to the hilt. Like there was, as far as rhetoric and ideology and worldview went, there was no doubt about the support for Ukraine. Now, that's not the case. Now there's acceptance that Trump literally doesn't support Ukraine. And you can't doubt that because you just need to listen to his words. Right, Budanov here says, quote, the Russia's top leadership now understands what a big mistake they made in 2022 because their intelligence, which is based on false data, completely failed. Right, I just wanted to talk about this because someone called me out the other day for saying, look, I really don't think you should minimize this by saying that there was that it was a special military operation at the beginning of the war, like I keep claiming, because I think it minimizes blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, that's exactly what it was. It changed the war accidentally. They didn't plan for it. And they didn't plan for it because they had poor intelligence. And I would deeply like to know how that happened, how they got poor intelligence, I wrote an article on this back in February or March 2022, which is like, how do I have better intelligence than the FSB? How do I, sitting in my office on the south coast of the UK, understand the Ukrainians better than the Russians and the Russian FSB and military? To the point where they thought that they could do a special military operation to switch over the government like that in 3 days, and couldn't predict that there would be that much resistance from the Ukrainians. Like, it's insanity. Anyway, this is what, like, if you doubt my own thesis here, it's the thesis of the Ukrainians, and indeed I'm going to show you it's mainstream acceptance. So Russia's top leadership now understands what a big mistake they made in 2022 because their intelligence, which is based on false data, completely failed, says Budanov. And then he goes on to say this: Russia wanted to capture Kyiv in 3 days, special military operation, and suppress the centers of resistance across the country in 10 days. That is not a war. That is just an incisive operation to go and cut the head off the serpent, as they would have seen it. Now, the Russian armed forces have problems, and so do we. Don't lose faith. Everything is under control. I just wanted to play you this. This is Steve Rosenberg in Moscow, BBC correspondent, saying exactly this today.
Next, that's the question, isn't it? Let's go live to Moscow, speak to our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg. And Steve, 3 years after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, how will the Kremlin be reflecting today?
Well, think back 3 years, John. This wasn't supposed to be a war. I think the Kremlin conceived this as a special military operation, as they still call it. They thought it was going to be quick and over in a few weeks, but it went wrong, not according to plan. And here we are 3 years on. I think the Kremlin...
So so on and so forth. That's exactly my point. It was planned to be something. It became something else very quickly. It's that simple. So the history books are going to be, I think, I would love to know what went wrong in those, not just the early days, but actually in the preparation for what was an SMO. How did they prepare it so badly to the point where it accidentally became a war 2 or 3 days later, and then all the cock-ups then until the end of 2022 before they started getting their act in order, because they had to replan for the whole thing. Because it accidentally became a war, they just didn't have anything in place. There was no war planning. It's that simple. So, some people say that Russia were at their weakest in that first year because If certain things had happened and if Ukraine had all the weapons they've got now and blah blah blah, then actually they could have won it. Then I'm not sure. These counterfactuals, these alternative histories are very very easy to predict, but impossible to know. That's my thesis. Anyway, explosions have been reported near the Russian consulate in Marseille, in France. Apparently, there were Molotov cocktails thrown into the Russian consulate there. 30 firefighters and some police are on the scene, so that's happened. We are hearing that Poland's foreign minister reveals that recently Putin secretly sold off 100 tons of Russian gold reserves. Let's listen to Sikorsky.
And can the European Union give such guarantees? It's not really a security organization.
Well, Ukraine, remember, has 110 brigades in the field. They've destroyed most of Russia's tanks. They produced 1.5 million drones last year. They are going to produce 4.5 million drones this year. If you'd asked me 3 years ago where Ukraine and Russia would be in this war in 3 years' time, I don't think either of us would have guessed that Russia would only capture 20% of Ukraine's territory. And Putin, did you notice yesterday, interesting piece of news, has secretly sold 100 tons of Russia's gold. The Russian economy is getting into trouble. He has thrown everything he has in the last few months with these Pyrrhic victories, sacrificing thousands of soldiers to gain a village or two, precisely for this moment, to put himself in a position where he appears to be stronger than he is. Ukraine can fight on its own with our European support for the rest of this year, and I think Putin has to take this into account.
Really strong words there to suggest that, they don't need to rush to a hasty peace arrangement when Russia are particularly weak at the moment. They're on a precipice economically. They're not great militarily. And now, pulling out now from supporting Ukraine to force an early deal will only benefit Russia. But interesting there, as PS01 says, that may explain why the ruble strengthened against the dollar recently. Putin is trying to project economic power to impress fools like Trump and Mussolini. This it could well be kind of the last throw of the dice, or all the eggs in one basket, very expensive eggs, in one basket for Trump here. For Putin to impress Trump and say, look, we're economically fairly sound, we're militarily, we're still advancing, but of course they're exhausting themselves. There's another interesting nugget that I heard a couple of days ago, that companies or organizations in Russia are having to have a certain, they're changing the way, something to do with the targets they have for mobilization within different organizations. And this is kind of, they're changing it up a little bit, which is in a way that they did when they had the previous mobilization. And there are some suggesting that Putin might be getting ready to do a full mobilization. And that would be fascinating. I mean, terrible, but it would be interesting if Putin did that, what the reaction of the rest of the world would be, not least, obviously, Ukraine. But anyway, we'll move on. Ministry of the Economy has announced that there are $350 billion worth of rare earth resources in the occupied territories. Those are the occupied territories, not as a whole. But there's been obviously a lot of talk about the American demands on Ukraine for this minerals agreement. But if a lot of those rare earth minerals and resources and whatnot are in occupied territories, how does that play out? And will that actually give the US impetus to get those territories back under Ukrainian control and not Russian control? So yeah, that's an interesting dynamic. And of course, being the third anniversary today of the war, there are a huge number of leaders meeting in, I was watching this live on the news, or not live, but years ago. There's Andriy Yermak and Sabiha, Antonio Costa, Ursula von der Leyen, and Commission. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, I think was that Bridget Brink? I don't know. But I was like, how, There's Justin Trudeau. And you think all the people we know now that we wouldn't have known previously, just being into this war, how geeky we are in the world of geopolitics. Anyway, world leaders are all meeting there with leaders from, what does it say here? Spain, Canada, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia have arrived. 13 are in Kyiv and 24 are joining online. And there's a flurry of announcements concerning military hardware going to Ukraine. Canada's giving more, and other nations are also joining in with that. As well as that, the EU has adopted a 16th package, and of course I'll report this all later properly. 16th package of sanctions on the third anniversary of the invasion. Disconnection of 13 banks from SWIFT. Sanctions on 73 vessels, 53 individuals, and a ban on aluminium imports, and the suspension of licenses of 8 Russian media outlets in the EU. As someone says, the only question is, why do we have to wait 3 years to do that? But of course, yeah, that while that's valid, it's good that that has happened today. And they've also announced 3.5 billion. That's not like the military aid. I think that's part of the funding underwritten by the loans, underwritten by the frozen Russian assets. So those loans, I think that's what that tranche is. Or it's 3.5 billion of the 50 billion aid package that the EU have put in place. That's over a certain amount of time. Is that over 5 years or something? Anyway, no, it can't be that long. But anyway, so they're getting some more money there, which is good news. And that's enough for me. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate your support. Take care, guys, and spare a thought for those who have lost their lives during this war. And I will say on both sides, I think there are victims on the Russian side. And by victims, I mean people who have been brainwashed by a despicable authoritarian regime to believe horrible things about the Russians. And so we can still lay blame at those people and for doing horrific things. But some of those people will have been, victim to the horrific disinformation that the Russians partake in. But mainly, obviously, spare a thought for the Ukrainians defending their homeland and defending freedom and democracy and defending our freedom and democracy on the outer reaches of our different worlds, in terms of Europe, or the Baltics, or Eastern Europe, or NATO, or just generally as members of the world. We are all, I think, benefiting from Ukraine fighting the good fight. And it's been 3 very long years. It's incredibly depressing to see what the United States of America is presently doing in regurgitating Russian propaganda and forcing Ukraine into a deal that it doesn't want to do, while not forcing Russia to do anything. It's heartbreaking, but so many people have lost their lives unnecessarily due to the whims of a megalomaniacal, narcissistic dictator wanting to be the new Peter the Great. So thank you so much to the Ukrainians who have done what they have done, and for those who support them, both in Ukraine and around the world. Thank you for all you do, and I guess Slava Ukraini.